Good morning, everyone. As you're coming in, please put your name and organization in the chat box. So again, welcome to today's workshop. We will be focusing, this is EEP Workshop Series Part 2, and we'll be focusing on mentor and mentee recruitment. My name is Natalie Foster. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships with Mentor Virginia, and I'll be leading you through today's workshop. I also have Sarah Wilkinson here, our Program Manager, who will be chiming in as well with great resources. So if you're not familiar with Mentor Virginia, we train mentors throughout the Commonwealth in school-based and community programs, universities, and the workplace, and provide consulting services to mentoring programs based on the elements of effective practice for mentoring. Our mission is to foster quality mentoring relationships that empower, elevate, and encourage young people. And so again, today we will be discussing mentor and mentee recruitment. I hope everyone had a chance to put their names and organizations in the chat box. Glad to see some folks from last time as well. At this time, I'm going to let Sarah take over a couple of these slides.
Great, thank you, Natalie. So just wanted to, for those who, this might be the first workshop in the series that you're participating in, this is part of a larger series of 8 workshops where we're digging into the elements of effective practice for mentoring, which are the national best practice standards for youth mentoring programs. The series is running through from July through December of this year. And those who attend all 8 workshops will be able to earn a certificate in the EEP. And then hopefully you all saw, I sent this yesterday, I can also share it in the chat again this morning. There is a companion workbook for this series, part 2, that includes many resources, and a lot of which we'll be touching on and talking about in various ways today. So that is a great resource that you can use anytime going forward. And then also just wanted to mention as well that we do have no-cost technical assistance consulting, and that is another available resource for your program. If you want to access some customized support on recruitment, just know that that is something that is available to you, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. And then, so for those who are not yet familiar with the elements of effective practice, which we call the EEP because it's a mouthful, just know that these best practices that we're going to be talking on today are primarily rooted in one-to-one mentoring that is working in either community or site-based settings. There are additional supplements to the elements of effective practice that focus on other program models, and those links are all in the companion workbook. So if you are running a group mentoring program or doing peer mentoring, for example, you can find specific information about recruitment in those program models in those additional supplements.
I know a couple more folks joined us today, so if you could put your name and organization in the chat box, that would be great. And again, just reviewing our ground rules for today. Everyone is welcome to participate. We hope that you're able to join us on camera. There will be a breakout session later on. We'll do a poll. Sometimes I'll ask you to participate in the chat box. Just remembering, to be respectful and inclusive of everyone, everyone's individual perspectives and values, that we agree to respect each other's opinions. Everyone, like I said, is included in this group, so we want to have some shared airspace as well. So today's training will provide mentoring programs with clear direction on how to recruit mentors and mentees for your program. After today's workshop, you will be able to understand how to recruit mentors whose skills, motivations, and backgrounds best match the goals and structure of the program, provide frameworks and tools for recruiting mentors and mentees, and identify how to communicate to mentors about how mentoring and volunteering can benefit them. So what is recruitment? I offer up a standard definition for you. Recruitment is the action of finding new people to join an organization of support or to support a cause. Successful recruitment is an outcome of overall program quality. Simply put, if yours is a well-run professional program, recruitment will be a whole lot easier because those qualities will shine through in everything you do. This is why we start our series with the design of your program. So maybe in the chat box, how many of you do recruitment? Just kind of give me a thumbs up if you do recruitment. You're responsible for doing recruitment. So far, I've got one person, someone assists with recruitment. Yep, we got some thumbs up. Okay, great. So, really looking at the recruitment, who is your ideal mentor? What are the characteristics of your ideal mentor? And what would motivate them to get involved in your program? What tools do you use to recruit? Where can you reach your target audience? Are you going to find your ideal mentor on a social media platform? Are they part of a professional network? Are they part of a faith community? When is a good time to recruit? Based on who your ideal mentor is and where you're going to find them, what season is the best time to try to get them involved? And finally, how can you successfully recruit? What strategies are most effective for your program when recruiting mentors? You should be able to answer these questions before you even start recruitment. Also, reevaluate these periodically. Are these sources and these messages still effective? So before jumping into mentor recruitment, it's valuable to take a step back and ensure your mentoring program is, ready to engage in mentoring activities. So I wanted to point out here that, like I said, quality of your program matters first. You can't just jump into recruitment. And these here are specific to, they're add-ons for recruiting mentors for boys of color. But they are a good idea to keep in mind for all of your recruitment. You'll see, do they have a readiness to engage in mentoring work through race and a gender lens? Oops, I'm sorry, let me go back here. Do they have readiness to acknowledge the injustice of unequal race and gender? Do they have a readiness to address the injustice of race and gender disparities? Do they have a readiness to employ targeted strategies and a readiness to use race and gender specific metrics to evaluate success? So at this time, Sarah's going to pull up a poll for us. And, really it's how much time should your program plan to spend recruiting mentors? Most people.
Give it a couple more seconds here.
Okay, great. Most people say recruitment is a year-round activity. So I've got some seasoned folks here on the line for sure. That's right. Recruitment is a year-long activity with an exclamation point. Recruitment is part of everything your program does. Not all recruitment happens within the context of a plan. You may have a planned presentation at local businesses, public service announcements on the radio, or booth at community events. But recruitment is just as likely to happen in a casual conversation at the grocery store or at a barbecue hosted by one of your mentors on a Saturday afternoon. It can happen anytime and anywhere. Your program is engaged in recruitment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every time you interact with a community member or a potential volunteer. Like I said, whether through an advertisement, a marketing campaign, or a personal conversation, you're leaving an impression about your program. You're conveying something positive, you hope, about the work you do and the quality of your services. All of these impressions affect how potential mentors view you and your mentoring opportunity. I'm going to give Sarah a chance to chime in here about some helpful resources.
Yes, so on page 5 of the companion workbook that I shared in the chat, you will find the link to the part 1 workbook, just in case you were not part of that training or that workshop and want to be able to see that, because that will make sure that your program is set up with all of the quality design and structures that you need in place before you're ready to reach that recruitment stage of the program. You'll also find some guiding principles of mentor recruitment, which might be valuable, again, to help you assess your readiness as a program to recruit. And there's also a readiness tool, which Natalie kind of gave a preview of, with those 5 different areas to consider. And there's an actual tool that goes along with that can help your program really think through whether you're ready to engage the work through those lenses.
So now let's take a deep dive into mentor recruitment. Before you begin recruiting mentors, it's important to take time to identify who you are trying to recruit and what barriers exist for those potential mentors. Let's look at some of those considerations. The first one you see is the needs of the young people who will be mentored. And we talked about that last time, kind of in your needs assessment. The voices and input of the young people and families you're working with. The geographic area you're working in. Is there a university close by? Is there a faith community close by? Or a corporation? The needs of the broader community and your program's model of service delivery. But notice how our top 2 ones really are about thinking about the young people first and getting their voice in there as well. So in 2018, a survey called The Power of Mentoring came out to help programs understand who is interested in mentoring. So let's look at some of these statistics. I'll give you a minute to look at them, and then we'll kind of talk about, do they surprise you based on how you've been recruiting mentors or who you've been able to recruit? So I'm going to open up the floor for anyone that had some kind of ahas during this as they're looking at the survey, how it compares to what you've been finding in your community.
So my name is Sid Dallas, and I'm an ordained pastor for 20 years. And we've run a school-based mentoring program, as well as, since I'm the youth and young adult pastor, at my church, we've run mentoring programs in the church as well, and in the community, in community centers. So the only thing that surprises me here is where you have more men than women are serving as mentors. Um, uh, like here in Richmond, I know that a lot of the fraternities have very strong, here in Richmond, Virginia, have very strong mentoring programs. So yeah, but that surprises me. I would have thought that more professional women serve as mentors. So that's really good, though, that we have a lot of men that are mentoring. But other than that, nothing else surprises me here, according to like my experiences.
Right. That one kind of surprised me as well, I have to say. Certainly because I think that a lot of us are trying to recruit for men. And yet, if you look at the survey, it says you need to be recruiting for women. So again, this was taken from all over the US, and we haven't broken it up by state. And that is something that when we do our own Power of Mentoring survey for our programs in Virginia, we will definitely be looking at. Anyone else that had a thought on this that surprised them or may influence how you go about recruitment?
Well, I'm Sandra from Virginia Beach with Men of Faith, and we work with a lot of students in the school system and the communities surrounded as well. And that more men kind of stuck out as well. We're constantly trying to find mentors for the young males in the schools. We actually have a male program focusing in on them. And it's difficult to find males. Usually they're older, retired, and it's difficult to find the males that can relate to them closer in age or college students. So that definitely stuck out to me as well for the more men.
Well, and if you look at that, Sandra, too, that it says 2 out of 3 are under 40. So
Yeah.
looking at those young professionals and college students, that's what the data is saying are those that are getting involved. So that's another surprise there.
Yeah, and ours are the opposite. Most of them are elderly.
Right.
Elders, yes. Thank you.
And I think the other thing, if you notice, there are 2 others that, the strong ethnic mix. I think that sometimes we think there's not a good balance, but if you look at the combination of Black, Hispanic, and Asian, that almost makes up more than the white at 51% and the 5% at other. So, there is some good news that, like I said, across the US, some of our tougher recruitment issues may be changing. And I think even that one down there, more conservative, surprised me too. I think that we think that more liberal people are passionate, about volunteering and nonprofits and things like that. But yet you'll see too that conservatives make up 54% of those that are volunteering. Any other comments before we move on to the next slide? So, like I said, one of the other things to look at when you're creating a mentor recruitment plan are to kind of assess, do a SWOT analysis. What are our barriers for mentors? So just looking at those top 3, there's one that we can control and the other 2, maybe we can't control as much. But that first one, it says 26% don't know how to get involved. So that really tells us, that messaging is crucial in this. We may not be able to control the time due to career and work, although programs that have gone to e-mentoring or hybrid have found that they've been able to recruit more people that thought that they didn't have travel time to do that. Don't know kids in my neighborhood. So, I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation about how your mentees can help recruit mentors for you and getting to know them. Has anyone else seen a barrier for mentors not mentioned here? Well, like I
Hi,
said,
this is
go
Ramika.
ahead.
Hi, Ramika from Mentor Virginia. I would say language is not listed here, but that can certainly be a barrier for those wanting to mentor in certain communities or certain groups, but just not knowing how to speak the language, or
Right.
even culturally not understanding, certain terms, within a particular language.
Yep, that's a good one. And so that would mean a lot of training on the front end for your mentors to make sure that they are, feel comfortable or explaining that that would be offered in your program. So in addition to reviewing kind of like, when we were talking about designing your program, reviewing your program's mission statement and reflecting on the goals that your program is trying to achieve, there are some other things that should be considered when looking at mentor characteristics. So just kind of take a moment here to read through those. And again, many of these will be important when you're doing your screening as well. So, if you set them up as to what things will be expected in your recruitment, and also talking to them that they will be trained in these things, will probably encourage them to apply to be a mentor. I'm going to let Sarah take over here for just a moment.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. So in terms of resources around who to recruit and thinking about your targeted recruitment audiences, there are some resources on page 6 of the companion workbook for this workshop. There are 5 considerations for establishing your target mentor characteristics. So that will help you kind of go through and think about the different things that your program should consider and how to tailor those specific considerations to your program as you're thinking about who you're even trying to target for your mentors. On pages 8 to 10 of the Guide to Mentoring Boys and Young Men of Color, there are some specific best practices around recruitment. And so I highly recommend digging into those and kind of looking at how those might apply to your program. And then you will also find an extended list of common barriers to recruiting mentors. I know that the list that we showed with that chart was not all inclusive. And I guarantee you the list that we've got going right now is not all inclusive either, but there is some extended stuff on there. So just peeking at that and seeing if any of those might apply to the target audience that you're attempting to recruit as well.
So once you know who you're trying to recruit to volunteer with your program, you can develop recruitment messages and materials that can effectively target those you are seeking. Start with having a volunteer position description that you can share with prospective volunteers, and publish online on various volunteerism websites is recommended. Use the process of drafting the description to ensure all program stakeholders have a strong understanding of the mentor role. So I know that we always put things in the positive, but we want to make sure that you think about those, be careful about those hidden messages that you may be putting in your recruitment materials. What level of education are you implying with your word choice? Is it really necessary to have a college education? You don't want to exclude anyone that thinks, oh my gosh, I'm seeing such big words in this. Avoid program jargon. I know sometimes we're so used to that, but being very clear and concise with what your program involves. Be specific, not just volunteers wanted, talk about what a mentor is, because sometimes when you see a volunteer position, sometimes people think, is this like a non-paid experience? What's happening here? And then, more importantly too, using photographs. We know a lot of people are visual when you're doing the recruitment flyers, but make sure that you're kind of using a variety of things, that the one image that you're using isn't saying, oh, someone says, that's not me. I don't see me in that recruitment flyer. So using men and women, a variety of ages and races, making sure that a picture where volunteers are actually doing something, not just kind of in a business suit, right? And that goes down to that next one too, business or casual setting, someone who's smiling, enjoying the experience, and has some warmth and energy to them. Any other kind of thoughts on this, or things that you think, gosh, maybe we've had some hidden messages and it's deterred folks from applying?
Hi, this is Teresa. I can't turn my camera on right now, but I don't know if it applies at this section or if it would be at another section, but are there like things that are important not to say, or things that maybe we can't say to a mentor or cannot ask them? I guess given where, where standards are, things, that could cross the line into their personal lives. And yet I know we also need to know some things about them personally, as far as background checks and things like that. But is there a line where you can cross that's not professional?
I'll let some of my other TA folks on the line here take on some of that, because it is a good question that we have been asked. And there have been certain things about, sexuality, vaccinations, all of these things. So I'm going to I see Ramika smiling, so she may want to chime in here. So I'll let her go ahead with this one.
Sure. From my experience, I think the kind of general rule of thumb is to stay away from things that might appear discriminatory. So you wouldn't ask someone, as Natalie mentioned, about their sexual preferences, or whether or not they're handicapped, or whether or not or maybe that's not a politically correct term, so I apologize. You wouldn't ask someone if they plan to get married anytime soon, or how many children they have, or that kind of thing. Whether or not they take any medications, and whether or not they are in therapy for any reason, things that could otherwise make someone feel like you are discriminating against them could be a liability issue. So they're just no-nos. What race are you, or how do you identify? That type of thing will get you in trouble. So there are ways to determine the quality of a mentor without having to go that far. And typically, you'll learn things about a mentor as your process unfolds, where people are willingly engaging and sharing about themselves because they're comfortable with you. But you really can't touch upon certain things without putting yourself in jeopardy of discriminating.
And I will add on, I think just even thinking as mentors, volunteers, any kind of those HR policies, if you were going to hire someone, what things would you ask in that respect would apply here as well. And putting things in a positive, how you are eligible versus you're ineligible because of these things. So they will self-select based on what the eligibility is. So when you look at, kind of what to include in your mentor position description. So of course, the position title, a general program description, some of their responsibilities. I think the most important one is that time commitment. Folks really want to know how long they're getting into something, how often. Again, I think when you were talking about what can we ask of them, kind of put the qualifications. You can put some required ones and then some desired ones, just like you would on a job description. Make sure that you include the benefits to the mentor. And we'll look at this a little bit later as to why that's important in recruitment. And finally, how to apply. So, like I said, here we go. Again, from the Power of Mentoring survey, why the major reasons why mentors engage. And you can see the top 3 there: to help youth become better educated. I think this is kind of interesting and surprising to me. I think that, not every program is a tutoring program. And we also know so many of the systems in place that are not equal in education. So to have that expectation that a mentor is going to help a young person become better educated, and maybe that they want to participate more at school because of having a mentor. I want to give back to or improve my community. And the third one, I'm concerned about the next generation, which I think is kind of funny too, because I think the younger people are more concerned about us than, and that goes into that teaching and learning moment too, with mentoring and mentees. And I think that would be important to illustrate in your mentor recruitment, that this really is about shared power, teaching and learning, and that the young people want to be able to influence you just as much. So again, kind of looking at these reasons why mentors want to engage, is there any that surprised you or that you hadn't thought of? I'll have you to.
Yes, this is this Isaac.
Okay.
Let me turn my camera on. I apologize. I think one of the ones that surprised me for why mentors want to engage was to enhance my career. I just assume that that would be the furthest thing from a person's mind that would want a mentor. So
Well, and I will say that being in the nonprofit world for quite a while, it's kind of an old school thought, but there are companies that if you volunteer in the community, you might get looked at for that next leadership position. So in that
Yep.
way, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that you see it there. I hope that that's not their only reason for getting into it.
that's what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You want to kind of be, when you're looking at that recruitment of them, if that's their number one reason, you might want to kind of have some more education there. So looking at these reasons why, and maybe having a checklist on your recruitment materials, what are some of your reasons, and it will kind of show you where you need to be on that spectrum. I think it's interesting to note someone I know or trust asked me to mentor 41%. So that says word of mouth recruitment is huge right there. The company I work for offers the opportunity. So that means they've got volunteer hours. So again, when you're looking at corporate mentors, they have a little bit more time and they're going to get paid to do that. What I like about corporate mentors too, is sometimes you can engage them to become donors for you, right? Because if they're getting paid for that time, maybe they'll give it back as well. So remembering to, when I talked about kind of those recruitment, putting it on your flyers, your information, making sure that mentors know what the benefits are, or your potential mentors. And 50% said a sense of purpose, 47% sense of giving back, investing in the next generation. But what was nice to me is to see 40%, 6%, number 3, just fun, happiness, interesting experiences. Really having a passion for getting to know other people and enjoying that relationship. Finally, one of the ones I wanted to look at is, what does mentoring in the future look like? So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of digest this one here. You'll notice the dark blue were for the answers that were much more likely, and then the lighter blue is somewhat more likely. And when you're looking at that top one, again, that flexibility so that I can mentor at times that work for me, that is something that we've learned this year for sure, coming out of the pandemic, and how flexibility has made a difference for keeping your current mentors and recruiting more. And then looking at that second one, knowledge of resources about how to effectively mentor a youth. This one, again, is super important. It goes into how much training is involved for them. We know some mentoring programs, as they're recruiting mentors, will actually do kind of a pre-training to see if this is for them. Are they getting enough resources? And then additional deeper dives as they go along throughout the year. and then specific guidelines on appropriate activities when I mentor. I know that not all mentoring programs have, activities that they're working on, but we do know that when things are project-based, it's easier for mentors to connect. And, the mentors are more likely to say, yes, I would want to be part of that program. And I'm going to go on to the next slide so Sarah can kind of go over her resources. And I know that we have a question in the chat box, and we'll get back to that, Bianca.
So in terms of resources that you'll find in the companion workbook around what to say and how to, figure out what your recruitment messaging will be, on page 7, you'll find a resource designed to help you develop a mentor position description for your own program. There's also a great example of an entire social media marketing campaign, and it's specific to trying to recruit Black men as mentors for Black boys. So it's the Black Mentoring Social Media Marketing Campaign, and that goes, that is an in-depth social media marketing campaign. So that can really walk you through what it looks like to draft and get your messaging together, to get your materials kind of from start to finish. So I highly recommend looking at that. And then you can also find a deeper dive into some of those hidden messages that you might find in your recruitment. So there's a tool there to help you kind of pinpoint where some of those hidden messages might be showing up in your own messages that you have.
And Sarah, can you read Bianca's comment?
Yes. So Bianca offered earlier that she would like more guidance around how programs are handling being back in person with COVID, with vaccination. This has been a question in regard to recruitment that I've been getting.
Anyone on the line, have you been able to address this specifically? And Sarah, I don't know, have you worked with any programs right now that have come across this question, and give an example of how they're addressing it?
Well, I think one of the biggest questions right now is, our guidelines changing so fast because we don't really know what's going on with the Delta variant. So I think a lot of programs might be in a space right now where they might have had a plan, but plans might be shifting, whether they feel like they are going to be able to do in person or some sort of hybrid. I think some programs that I heard of were not requiring vaccination or proof of vaccination, but they were using an honor system where they asked all of their volunteers to be vaccinated, but they didn't want to go so far as to require them to show them their card, just because of the liability that might kind of go along with that. But as the federal mandates become more common, it's possible that it will, the doors will open, that more programs feel comfortable to have vaccination mandates. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's definitely, we can work on our end to get some more resources in this area out to programs as things continue to change.
Great, thank you. So the next part that we wanted to go over is really building a recruitment plan and what kind of is involved in that. So there's certainly written policies and procedures on, for your internal use that you're going to need. So for prospective mentors, what's a clear eligibility requirement and description of screening process? For mentees and their caregivers, again, those clear eligibility requirements and clear written consent form for caregivers. And finally, in your recruitment and marketing, looking at your recruitment message, identifying your target audience, time frame and match goal, and key action steps. And I know that Sarah, later on in the presentation, Sarah has an actual form for you and template for you to be able to figure all of these things out in that recruitment and marketing. So I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of talk about where to recruit. And I'm going to show you this quick video, and then we're going to kind of popcorn in the chat box to talk about some some creative places that you may have not thought about of where to recruit. Give me a second here. I went too far. It's actually embedded here.
As being high in crime and poverty. And that's why Omaha Public Schools and several community groups are coming together to make sure that children who live in the Village Zone have resources for success. In today's In the Classroom, we show you how they're reaching out to men to help with their mission.
So they might be okay.
A cut, a shave, and some conversation. It's what Daniel Goodwin serves up at Classic Barber Shop near 90th and Ruggles.
Probably more than any other industry, you actually get in tune with people's actual feelings and their actual thoughts.
As clients relax in the chair, Goodwin lends a listening ear, and based on what he hears, he's ready to recruit.
Youth who are mentored are more likely to become leaders themselves.
Danita Webb is the mentoring specialist with Omaha Public Schools. She reached out to about 5 barbershop owners, asking them to send any possible mentors her way.
While we have the youth available and youth are wanting this mentorship, it is just difficult to find mentors.
This is the target area. The Village Zone has the highest crime rate per capita in Douglas County. OPS, the Empowerment Network, and Midlands Mentoring Partnership work to provide mentors to African-American 6th grade boys who live there.
Really focused on 6th grade because that's the time where they're making that transition to middle school. And there's so much research that shows that that is the time and the age where we know that our youth can either go the right way or the wrong way.
To me, a mentor is like somebody that help you when nobody else can help you.
Maurice Bell and his brother and sister have a lot of energy. They burn it off running and playing sports. Bell says he can talk to mom and dad, but a mentor is different.
Then he'll come to my house, and sometimes he'll take me and we'll go play Fortnite at his dorm, I think, because he's in college.
Because little connections can make a big difference for a child. And sitting in one of these chairs could be a man looking for a good cut, but destined to guide a child.
So again, in the chat box, some ideas, unique ideas that you've tried to recruit mentors. Like I said, they were talking about barber shops here, but any other ideas you have?
This is Anu, Woman of Connection. I use the platform Handshake.
Okay, Handshake. Yep, that's a great one. Someone said they're asking current mentors to refer a friend, someone who they think would be a great mentor. Again, that's a great recruitment method. Yep, each one, reach one. So I'm going to let Sarah kind of close us out here on this section.
Yeah, so resources for building a recruitment plan that you'll find in your companion workbook on page 10. There's a resource and a kind of a brainstorming worksheet to help you think through where to recruit mentors. There's a lot of different ideas on that worksheet to get you started in your own thinking. There's a resource around who should recruit for your program. And this comes from the same guide that the social media marketing campaign. So it's targeted toward recruiting Black men for Black boys, but that resource, they have a really great section in there about thinking about who is the one, sharing your recruitment messages. If you're trying to recruit a very targeted population, it can be helpful to think who in your network or who in your program, who is already on your, volunteer team that can help you. And they might, have an identity that is shared or a background that is shared or somewhere that they have buy-in with a particular group that you're trying to reach. So there's more information on that. And then there's also a worksheet that can help you develop your own mentor recruitment plan if you've never developed one for your program.
And finally, I'll let Sarah kind of talk about the Mentoring Connector too as a resource.
Yeah, so this is another place where you can recruit mentors. So this is similar to other volunteer websites that you might have heard of, like Volunteer Match, where you can list your program. But what's unique about the Mentoring Connector is that it is only mentoring programs on there. So it is the only national database of mentoring programs where you can list and seek out to recruit mentors. You can also recruit mentees through this platform. And it's a way to increase your program's visibility, to build your credibility, because there are a few quality indicators that your program has to reach before you're approved to be listed on the Mentoring Connector, but it is free. If you would like more information on getting your program on this platform, I would be happy to provide that. But that is also a great resource to consider.
So, and then again, just creating your marketing materials. Recruitment flyers are always great. Partnering with local universities, attending and speaking at local networking events, approaching local businesses, increasing your web presence by posting, online. And then finally, just kind of producing those buttons that say, ask me about mentoring and distribute to mentors. Like you said, if you've got mentors already, that's a great way. If they're at the grocery store, someone might ask them about your program.
So in terms of resources in this area, you will find some on page 11 of the companion workbook. There's a sample program outline, there's a sample program flyer, and several other resources that you'll find just as you're thinking about how to build recruitment materials that align with, who you're trying to target and the messaging that you've come up with.
So here's where we're kind of getting to the meat of recruitment. Using strength-based approaches to recruiting and mentoring. One of the most important things to remember when planning for any program communication efforts is including all recruitment activities is to use strength-based approaches when describing your program, the young people you work with, and the communities you're seeking to partner with. So we kind of just gave you an example of what this looks like of a before and an after. So before, it's adolescents from communities of color often have lower high school graduation rates than their white peers. It's really putting, kind of that pressure on the adolescents from the communities of color. And then if you watch how it's flipped afterwards, one impact of the history of racial segregation is that schools that serve communities of color tend to have less funding and fewer resources. So it really puts it back on the system and not the individual. This is one reason why adolescents of color have lower high school graduation rates than their white peers. So, really looking at what those strengths are and assets in the community. And again, kind of placing it and showing mentors that it's because of the systems that are in place, not those individuals. So we really wanted to take some time here to go through a strength-based activity. And as I'm setting up the breakout rooms, I'll let Sarah describe this for you. And we're going to try and give you about 15 minutes to complete this. So I'll let Sarah kind of describe it as I'm setting up the breakout rooms.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. So we'll break out into groups of between 3 to 5, depending on how the numbers work out. So in the chat, I'm going to drop a shared activity document. So you won't be able to edit this directly. So just keep that in mind, but it does have the activity on there. So there is a program outline when you open that link that is currently in a very deficit-based approach. And so there are a few questions and activities that kind of follow after you read through the program outline that you'll work through with your group. I recommend, maybe having a group member download that document, because once you've downloaded it onto your individual computer, you will be able to edit and take notes directly on it, or you can just pull up a separate document, take notes in a notebook, whatever your particular style is, and then having one group member be designated to share out, because we are, hoping to have a larger conversation about this activity afterward.
Okay. Am I good to open the rooms, or do you need to do something else, Sarah?
I don't think so. Hopefully folks are getting into the document. If there are any problems, please unmute and let us know if you're not able to get in.
I hope you had a chance to engage in the activity a little bit. You know, like we said before, the use of deficit-based approaches has been prevalent in the mentoring field for decades, but more programs are committing to using strength-based approaches. So we kind of use this as an activity to kind of see where you're at with your language that you've been using, and maybe to kind of shift things a little bit. So looking at this, room one, I don't know if you remember which number that you were in, but I know Aria was in that room. Who was you kind of your designated speaker for that room?
We didn't really pick one, but as you have pointed me out, I can, I know that I had Marilyn and Letitia and Teresa in my room.
Okay. So let me ask you then, you know, that first activity says, you know, work with your group to identify, you know, to identify an example of each of the following deficit-based frameworks in the program outline. So taking that first one, saviorism, is there anything in there that you kind of highlighted or some words that kind of just hit you as, oh, that sounds a little bit like saviorism?
Definitely. I think the emphasis that was on the father figure and trying to emulate a father figure and that kind of language that was there. I know that Marilyn and our group mentioned that it was very reactive language and not proactive. It was very much emphasizing what was lacking in these mentees and what, you know, needed to be fixed for them rather than, you know, bringing to the table what they have to offer, and just kind of using these like almost like dollar words that like, you know, like at risk and like, well, that's important. But anyways, just like it was language that could have been a lot more open-minded and a lot more thought through. And I was saying that I hope that wasn't the final draft.
Right, exactly. You know, and I think that's one thing a lot of times when we go through mentor training, that your role as a mentor is not to be a parent. So even to call the, you know, out in that space that you're a caring adult in that person's life, I think it also, what struck home for me is it negates the whole role of the mother too. You know, and I realize that it is about having a male figure in it, but that doesn't, you know, you can't do that to take away from what the mother is offering in that space as well.
Definitely.
So Stephanie, in your group, who was kind of the spokesperson, or can you talk about anything that resonated with blame in this scenario?
The spokesperson for our group. Maggie, if you're willing to share, go for it.
Hi. Something for blame?
Yes.
We actually didn't, we focused more on the other three.
Okay. Well, then go for helplessness.
One of the phrases we pointed out was in mentoring program goals, the phrasing, though their earthly father left them, imparted a lot of blame. Also words like stuck, being stuck in fatherless homes or lacking guidance. Those also imparted, helplessness.
Yes.
Those were the words that a lot of us, that we focused on mainly for that qualifier.
Right, exactly. And then Patricia, in your group, who is the spokesperson, or can you talk about stereotypes?
That would be me, Linda Faye. I was with Patricia and Minerva. Stereotypes. Well, we talked about the fact that this entire piece, in our opinion, spoke of stereotypes and the saviorism and all of that. And it began with the very first word of the name of the group, saving. Yeah, that would have been a turnoff to me and a lot of people I deal with right away. So we thought that there was much language in there that could have, I mean, much opportunity to be something really, a good description. I have a girls organization, mentoring group, and some of the people in the projects that I work with, they have fathers, strong fathers, saying, help me with my girls. So it's not always a fatherless home, and it's not always the father's fault.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that was what we discussed. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Ramika, your group, who is the spokesperson? And looking at that second question, does this program sound like it will be culturally relevant to the youth it seeks to serve? Why or why not?
I was the one taking notes for our group.
Yeah.
Me, Ramika, and Dwayne. And we actually did not get to that question. We focused more on the saviorism, blame, helplessness, and stereotypes.
Okay, well, talk to me about the blame piece.
So for blame, we noticed, and this was kind of already reflected in some of the comments that were already shared, is that it was almost as though it was passing judgment or blaming the young people's familial situation or their current family circumstances, and blaming being in a single parent household. And we just reflected on that there are certainly children who are very successful coming from single parent households, and but the description does not express this. It's very much blaming as though these young people are not going to be successful based on that.
Yeah. Yeah, language is super important. I've been a single mom, and when my girls were younger, even in the school base. And so thinking about it, there was a program where if you had experienced divorce or separation, you could go, and they called it banana splits. And I was like, that is the most horrible name ever. My kids still say, you put us in banana splits, Mom. And, just thinking about shifting it so that those labels aren't part of the kids, in that respect. Allison, was your group who was designated there? Were you guys able to kind of dive into question 2?
Yeah, I think that Bianca really had a lot to say. Bianca, do you want to kind of take over from that? Because I kind of piggybacked everything you were saying, so.
Yeah, we didn't think that it was culturally relevant, but we didn't focus on that question. We actually focused on question 1, and then we kind of went into rewriting some of the language.
So give me an example of something you rewrote.
Well, we talked about how in A, when they mention the statistics about the city of Norfolk, that perhaps instead of mentioning these statistics, that really that there's a perceived lack, and then they connect that lack to the homes being run without the father present. We talked about how they could replace it with a positive mentoring statistic. So maybe, saying how mentoring youth that are mentored are this percentage more likely to become leaders in the community. Maybe using that statistic to replace this, because if the goal is to change these statistics with mentoring, then why not talk about the positive, the positive impacts of mentoring? And then with B, I think I rewrote it to say, we exist to support young men as they grow into strong leaders within the community and their families, just already acknowledging that these young men are, resilient, they're strong, they are already leaders, they have the potential to be this, and that we are just there to support, to be an extra layer of support. We're not there to change them, we're not there to mold them. That is the role of the parent. We're just an extra layer of support, just like every single parent needs, has, you know, extra layers of support. So those were two that we did. We didn't make it to C.
Okay, great. And Sid, how about your group? Is there anything that hasn't been discussed yet that you would like to share, or part that you got to?
Hey, hi, I'm sorry. I was on mute and didn't realize it. Kisa took a lot of the notes, and so Kisa, are you willing to share?
Yeah, it's Keisha. And yeah, so with me and her, we talked about question 2, about whether or not it was I'm trying to get back to question 2. I'm all over these screens. So question 2 was, does this program sound like it will be culturally relevant to the youth it seeks to serve? We said we thought it was a good program that needed some tweaks, like everybody is saying, but we wanted to we were just saying that it needed to be opened up to all boys, because, you know, African Americans are not the only ones that struggle with, you know, not having that father figure in the home. And so why does it have to be just to them? Maybe if we can open it up to all, because all young men will benefit from it.
Exactly.
Luis was saying kind of no, that it wasn't as culturally relevant as it could be, because we were just talking about the various areas where we from and who we work with, and we just see it's a need overall, not just for African American young men.
Right.
Yes, especially with immigration being on the rise. There's a lot of, in my mentoring program, we had a lot of Latino youth, in addition to African American.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Like I said, this is, if you didn't get a chance to do all of it, really kind of dive into it and see how you can make that difference, and really think about the language that you're using in that respect. I'm going to let Sarah wrap up this section here.
Yeah, so we have a lot of great resources around using strength-based language if you want to dive deeper. There are several resources in the companion workbook around, you know, direct examples of using strength-based language. Natalie showed one in the presentation earlier, but there are more that you can dig into there. And there's also a really helpful article that is like a how to create strength-based language for your program. So both of those resources are very helpful.
The next part of, you know, mentor recruitment we wanted to talk about is best practices for recruiting specific populations. And we have many more resources, but I just really chose one, and looking at how to approach male mentors, and some of those things, examining the lens of how men might perceive the opportunity and, you know, wish to participate. So really kind of that awareness, making the case for why they should mentor, understanding the role of stories, you know, talk about a male mentor and their story behind it, their comfort, you know, making sure that they feel comfortable that they can do it. They really want that clear outline about their commitment. Again, when am I going to mentor? How long am I going to mentor? Setting them up for success. They like that ability to win, closing and making the ask. That we have found that men are very open if they have a significant other in their life that will ask them to consider mentoring. And really thinking about overcoming some of those objections or concerns that male may have. So kind of digging deeper into those motivations. And again, you'll get this slide deck to look at, but really looking at the values function and understanding for that male what's important. So again, you might put a small checklist to kind of figure out what's important for them. Excuse me. You see that career function one show up again that, you know, we talked about. The volunteer has a goal of gaining career related experience through volunteering. A social function, this is super important too. And we'll talk about this on the next slide. A lot of males like the opportunity to be in a group setting, especially with other men, So thinking about that, if that's something that they're looking to do, you know, again, the values, the understanding function, they want to learn more about the world around them, and exercise skills that are, maybe unused. And finally, some more tips. Like I said, if possible, consider varying your program and how you talk about it. And this, again, is for male recruitment to make it more male friendly. They like the group mentoring, activity-based or project-based, something to do. And this last one, I've gone back and forth with different mentoring programs about it, but some choose a different name for male mentors. They like to be called coach or buddy or guide or friend versus just mentor. And as we talked about, again, where to find men, the barbershops, the fraternities, the recreation leagues, men church, groups, and maybe host information sessions at local taverns on Monday Night Football. Again, we talked about that geography, thinking about where they are, specific people that you're looking to recruit. I'll let Sarah wrap up this section here.
Yeah, so for more resources on recruiting specific populations, obviously we could not dig very deep into that in the hour and a half that we had here, but you can check out more resources in the companion workbook. There's a resource there on rural mentoring and thinking about recruitment, specifically in a rural setting. There's the Men in Mentoring Toolkit, which Natalie just pulled some examples from. There's more information on that. There's also a toolkit on how to recruit corporate mentors, if that is a target audience that your program is looking at. And then there are many, many population reviews that Mentor has created, and you can see the full list of those in the companion workbook, but those all have resources as well around recruiting when you're serving a specific population of youth, or if you're looking for a specific target of mentors for those groups, they provide insight into that.
And then finally, to close out kind of this recruitment of mentor section, we have a readiness for your recruitment. So looking again, just can't reiterate enough that strong foundation of your program. How are you raising money and putting it as a budget line item to make sure that you can devote time to mentor or mentee recruitment activities? Identifying other people on your team, not just you, but who else? Board members, other mentors, other staff members to help with the recruitment. And then again, if your program is serving youth from diverse backgrounds, ensuring your readiness. And we had some of those that we had named off before.
And there are more checklists in the at the end of the companion workbook. There are checklists for some of the other sections that we've talked about today as well.
So our next part is really mentee recruitment. And I know that some of you, this is very individualized and can be customized, and we can offer TA in the section. Some people have to recruit mentees and others do not. So we're just going to kind of give you a brief overview of this. Really thinking about if you do need to recruit mentees, what is included in your recruitment package. So making sure that you have an overview and fact sheet, description of the mentee's roles and responsibilities, an application form, an interest inventory, the parent caregiver permission form, a mentee agreement form, and any other things that you think would be relevant to your program. And then finally, to consider youth-initiated mentoring. So it may be that you have, this especially works well with youth that are, in that 13 to 18-year-old category, that having them look outside in their sphere as to maybe they can ask someone to be their mentor in your program. So looking at who's most important, who are the most important people in my life, people who are important to me and care about me, and people I know in my community. And again, that is a training that Mentor Virginia can offer to mentees to help them kind of build their dream team of mentors and really guide them through that process. Let Sarah step in here.
Yeah, so I know we had to fly through this section. There are more resources in the companion workbook that you'll see here on this slide. I will say too that mentoring recruitment really differs from program to program. So there are not a lot of resources out there. That is something that if you wanted to work on, that would be something through our technical assistance consulting that you could work on that with me and make that specific to your own program. So our next workshop is August 20th. We will be covering screening mentors and mentees. So we'll dig into all the best practices. We'll provide tools and talk about some different ways that you can think about making your process thorough, safe, but also inclusive. So there's a link in the chat to register for that one. And if you missed part 1 of the series, we did send out a recording and an assessment to make sure that if you're still interested in earning the certificate for the series, those are 2 things that are required to kind of still be in contention for earning that certificate. And if you need us to share that with you, if you were not on the email list for part 1, you can just let me know and I can send that out to you all as well. And then lastly, please let us know how this workshop was in your opinion. There's a link in the chat to the quick survey. We do take all of your feedback into consideration as we will continue to develop the other 6 workshops that we'll bring to you throughout the rest of the year.
Again, we just wanted to thank you for joining us today.
We'll send resources in the follow-up. So everything that we talked about, we'll make sure that you all have access to that and the slides as well.